Welcome to the Baseball Odds Watch podcast. Eddie Virgil, Chris Gambino. We're back. Another episode to take a look at some of these odds. Today we're doing NL Central's odds. Spring training has started. There's a game on behind me. I don't know who's playing. The Braves and the Marlins, and they're gonna play all year long. So nothing important going on there. Um, NL Central's. All right, so we were talking like a second ago before we just went live, and I love this division personally. I think it's gonna be a fun division to watch because the season is gonna progress, and when we take a look at the odds in a minute, you're gonna kind of see it. But I think this is like one of the most wide open divisions with every team basically having an equal chance to win it. But you don't?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a fun division, right? Like one team got better. One team got significantly better. That's what really concerns me. A couple teams really didn't do anything. They have some of the best young players in the game, right? The Pirates, Reds. But overall, it's just I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's like I could really see there's one team I really see winning this division when I think about it. There's only one team I think that has a chance in October.
All right,
Right.
I want to know if I can guess it as the show goes on. I'm not gonna guess it right now, but when we talk
Yeah.
about that team, I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna take a wild guess here. All right, so the World Series odds for our five NL Central teams. The Cubs are the highest rated favorite at 10th favorites. So barely cracking the top 10. Second are the Brewers at plus 5,000 at 19th favorite. So there's like a crazy jump. So Vegas kind of agrees with you.
Yeah.
Vegas is already kind of like, yeah, this isn't good. There's no way the NL. Now I don't know how much of what the Dodgers have done is factoring into that, but I don't think that. I don't know. I don't know. So third are the Reds plus 3,200, 21st favorites. Fourth are the Cardinals at 23rd favorites, and then Pirates at 24th favorites. Again, these are FanDuel's odds, which I mean, usually the order doesn't change from like app to app or website to website. The numbers might change a little bit here and there. Now, as far as the divisional odds go, the Cubs are the favorites at minus 105. This is not like the Dodgers a week ago that were like minus 650. It is minus 105, so it's not that much, especially considering the Brewers are the second favorites at plus 290. So essentially, you bet $10, you'll win 29. Reds plus 490, they're third favorites. And then there's like a little bit of a jump. Pirates, then Cardinals, they're both tied at plus 1,000. But I think like those top three odds, minus 105, plus 290, plus 490, goes to show that, like I said, like this is sort of anybody's division. And then a week ago we did the West and the Rockies were like plus 50,000. Like the lowest or the furthest odds are plus 1,000. So that's not too bad. It's saying it's very unlikely you're going to win the division, but it's a better chance than a lot of other teams in their division.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I think there's a storyline about it too. Like I will get into that. Like again, you got Chicago up top. There's a major reason why they're favorites. The Brewers, right? They won it last year, so they're right behind. The Reds, I see as like kind of like we'll talk about them, but I see them as like the wild card of the division. And then the Pirates and Cardinals are kind of just like the stragglers. So I think there is a reason why Vegas agrees with me, right? I don't always agree with Vegas, right? Last week with the Diamondbacks, that was I don't really understand what's going on there, but this is one like I totally agree. Like this, I could totally see this happening this year. Like exactly.
All right, so let's dive into it. Let's start with the Cubs.
Hmm.
Minus 105 again, slightly favorites to win the NL Central. Now, last year they didn't make the playoffs. Honestly, early on last season, I really thought they would.
Mhm.
Shota Imanaga came in hot. Like the dude looked unstoppable, but
Yeah.
he's coming from Japan, so and stayed healthy pretty much most of the season. So the innings kind of caught up to him, right? Like we saw Yamamoto pitching in the playoffs last year for the Dodgers. You gotta remember he was out like half the year.
Right.
So Japanese pitchers don't pitch nearly as much as MLB starting pitchers. They did get a Gold Glover in Ian Happ, who weirdly enough he wanted in left field. He plays everywhere for them,
Yeah.
and he's a switch hitter. Like if I have a kid and he plays baseball, I want him to be like Ian Happ. Hit both sides, play every position, just do whatever you can do. Now, they also went and added Kyle Tucker. Like they added Matt Boyd, sure, Justin Turner, sure. But Kyle Tucker, I think, was the biggest move in the entire NL Central. So with that, I'm gonna say this is the team you think improved the most.
Absolutely. Right. Now, we don't know is I actually it was 2 years ago, I had the Cubs going to the World Series 2 years ago. I had them my preseason podcast that I had similar to this. I had the Cubs going to the World Series. So I've always been very high on the Chicago Cubs. And that year was 2023. The vision was there, and that's kind of the same team. That's why I bring up that point. That's a very similar team. They still have Ian Happ. They still have Justin Steele, right? All those guys. The outfield is fantastic, right?
Yeah,
PCA in center is a great defender. They got Happ in left, and now they have Kyle Tucker and right, who's the big fish. One of the biggest signings of the or trades of the offseason. The biggest trade of the offseason, I think, easily. I remember the Yankees were in on him, and the Cubs came in with a great offer. They made that trade for Paredes at the deadline, and then they shipped him off to Houston to get Tucker. So they were very aggressive this offseason getting Kyle Tucker. They also improved the bullpen with Ryan Brazier and Ryan and Presley and a couple
yeah.
other guys as well. This team got significantly better, and the other teams really didn't. And so that's the main reason why I have the Cubs up top. 83 wins last year. I think they did enough this offseason to really build upon that. And I think they could be one of the teams to watch in the postseason, if I'm being completely honest with you, Eddie.
I think that Vegas does agree with you. Like I
Mhm.
do think that above every other team, like when we go through this as the episode goes on, we'll see like the NL Central tended to be a little inactive. It's hard to be active when the Dodgers take everybody, but they were a little inactive. The Cubs did get the biggest fish in the division. The problem I have though is not really a Cubs problem. It's more just like I don't think the NL Central teams, with the exception of like one, really needed to make too many moves to improve because the Brewers won this division with really nobody, right? They just
Mhm.
had good seasons out of guys. And for years, the last couple of years, the Cardinals have been looked at as the team that's supposed to do something in this division, and they haven't, right? But the Cubs did get better, right? They let Bellinger walk. He's a Yankee now. Um, which I can't wait for that episode, by the way. But he's a Yankee now. The outfield is a question mark to me. Not that they're not the best outfield in baseball. I think for sure they are. But who are you gonna play? Is Hap your Gold Glover now gonna switch to be a DH? Is Seiya Suzuki, who's one of the best arms on your team, gonna switch to be a DH? Tucker, you didn't pay all that money to not put him in the outfield.
Right.
Pete Crow Armstrong is like a really fast Roomba in center field. He takes everything out there, so you're not benching him. So your question is in the corners, more specifically in right field, I think, because that's where you've got your new big money guy and your big import in say Suzuki and Kyle Tucker. So are you gonna DH a guy that won a Gold Glove last year in Ian Happ, or are you gonna move him? He can play pretty much anywhere. That's my biggest thing with the Cubs. And then if you do that, right, who's to even say this will be Imanaga's second season in the major leagues, right? In our major leagues. So he's going to get scouted. Justin Steele's coming into his sophomore, essentially full sophomore year. So he's going to get scouted. Are you going to have those big years? And then you did just sign Justin Turner. So if you're going to move one of these outfielders to DH, why'd you sign Justin Turner? To back up Michael Busch at first? Because this is the kind of thing to me. I don't think that competition within a team is good for a team. And I think with the roster that the Cubs have right now, there's a little bit of that. And it could be just enough to sink a ship that's already kind of taken on water.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know coming into spring training, there was a little bit of a disagreement between Seiya Suzuki and Council on whether or not he'd be DHing. And I think that's the direction they're going. I think they're realizing that in spring training. I think they're going to use Seiya more as a DH, just because like you can't bench. I don't think you could bench to
You can't.
you can't bench him. You
And
can't
then
bench
you can't sit
or
Hap
Garcia.
after a gold glove.
You can't have your Gold Glover, as a DH. PCA is really his big thing is his glove, and then Kyle Tucker's an excellent right fielder as well. And right again, you don't just get him to be a DH. Right, the Yankees had to put Juan Soto in right when they traded for him. The Cubs have to play Kyle Tucker in right field. So I think that solves that logjam. I like the signing of Kyle Tucker because he's good depth. Again, you never know what could go wrong, and he's like the guy that never ages. So I think he'll be fine there. I'm honestly most concerned with with Shota Imanaga, because we see a lot of these Japanese pitchers. They come here, they always have a great first season, and it's that second year is really the defining factor. That's why guys like Yu Darvish and Masahiro Tanaka, I don't think get enough credit that they were able to
Yeah.
play for so long in this league. Because then you have like a Hideo Nomo who was great for 2 years and then fell off the face of a cliff, right?
Yeah.
You don't want that with Shota, right? You want him to be that great pitcher because a lot of them get hurt, right? Tanaka got hurt his first year, but a lot of these pitchers they come here, the ball is bigger in the United States, so they're not used to that and they get hurt. So for a guy like Shota Imanaga, he's the guy I'm really watching. But if he can put up another great season like he did last year, he was phenomenal last year. Justin Steele, he's another one. Is the injuries kind of gotten him a little bit, but if he could stay healthy, that's an excellent one-two punch. And again, they improved the bullpen. The infield is very solid, right? I like Dansby Swanson a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I like what they're doing. I like what they did. They got better and not marginally, right? They brought in a stud in Kyle Tucker.
Significant free agent.
Listen, I mean they did it. They got a lot better, and that's all you can ask. They had a nice season last year. They weren't really in it, but they kind of stayed afloat, and they've made themselves, I think, just the favorite in this division. And we're going to talk about the Brewers next, right? They kind of have it. They have history on their side because they're always able to make it in even without making those big offseason moves. But the Cubs, they did it the traditional way. They got better. They and that's all you can ask for, especially when you consider the fact that the other teams in this division didn't do much. So
Yeah,
at least I'll give the Cubs props for at least trying heading into the season.
for sure. Like you bring up the Brewers, so they went 93 and 69. They were that wild card team, and then they ran into the red hot Mets, and that Pete Alonso swing heard round Queens sent them home early, which is crazy because then they let Devin Williams go, right? They trade him to New York for Nestor Cortez Jr. They also signed Mark Canha, who had a pretty solid season last year. I don't know how much that one pitch factored into the Brewers being willing to trade Devin Williams. My thing is, you're one of the only teams that still hasn't won a World Series. How do you not be aggressive in the offseason? You have maybe the best catcher in baseball right now in William Contreras. He's gotten way better. We forget his big brother's even in his division because he's been so good. And then you got these great years out of these young guys, right? Jackson Churio, he got some rookie of the year votes. You got a gold glove out of Bryce Terang, right? Christian Yelich is aging like cheddar cheese or fine wine or whatever you want to call it because he's still solid out there. Sure, Brandon Woodruff is supposed to come back this year, and you still have Freddie Peralta, who's been pretty figured out when it comes to the playoffs. So you do have a good 1-2 in your starting rotation, and then I guess you're going to throw Nestor in there. But for a team that's consistently made the playoffs, like I guess my question, and this is my question to you. What do you think is happening? Do you think it's the Brewers just think they have enough? Again, they also lost Willie Adames this offseason. That's something I forgot to note. Um, and he was a big reason why they made it. So do you think they just think they have enough to do it, or
Yeah.
like what's happening?
Yeah, I think this is just the way they operate because this is the way they've done it for years. Last offseason, they didn't really do anything, and they traded Corbin Burns to the Orioles. They didn't really improve off of him, and they really believed in what they had, right? One guy who really took a step forward last year was Tobias Myers. He pitched in one of the wild card games against
Yeah.
the Mets. I don't think the giving up the home run to Alonso was any factor into trading Devin Williams to the Yankees. I think they were going to do
Really?
it because that's again this is a team that traded Josh Hader, they traded Corbin Burns. They trying to get as much as they can for the guy before he heads into the season, right? Because if they waited till the deadline and they're not in it, then whatever they got is probably
So
going to.
wait. So let me just so you think they're doing that they're trying to win by kind of selling off players last minute.
I think they're trying to win by just getting value for what they have and just building internally, totally internally. Like I don't think they believe in free agent signings at all, unless it's like Yasmani Grandal for 1 year, like a couple years ago, and then he was excellent, or Mike Moustakis, where they sign for 1 year and then they leave. They're about as small market of an organization as you have in Major League Baseball, but it works so well for them, and they do it the right way, and that's why I have a lot of respect for them, and I do think they're going to do well next season. I think the Cubs did it the traditional way, got better. I like what they have. I've always just maybe it's a little bit of I don't know bias. I'm not a Cubs fan, but I've always had a thing for the Cubs. Always liked the way they do things there. That's why I have the Cubs winning. But the Brewers, I think they're going to be just fine. I mean, they were very consistent last season, Eddie. They were really good throughout.
Yeah,
Um, when they traded Josh Hader, that we were having the same conversation, right? Like, what's going to happen next? Is Devin
yeah,
Williams going to take that role? He did. So I think they'll find somebody. I think relievers are easy to come by. That's why they only really got Nestor Cortez for him. But I do think Nestor Cortez is a good pitcher. I think he's going to do well there. I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I liked him on the Yankees. Um, I think they're just like that type of team that gets better marginally. The only question I have is who's going to take over at shortstop because they lost Willie Adames.
yeah,
That was the big one. That was the big one. But they still have some guys. They have Yelich. They have Contreras. Right? They have some guys in this lineup that could really make some noise. And you never know who's going to come up because, again, last season you had the Dodgers, you had the Yankees, all these great teams that were pretty pretty traditional last season. Again, with playing well throughout, but even those teams had some rough patches in the season. The Brewers are probably the most consistent team down the stretch last season. Really didn't have a hot streak. We're overall just consistently winning series, and they got to the postseason very, very easily. I think there's a very different
yeah.
story. Devin Williams just makes a better pitch there.
Yeah, I mean, they were in first place in the NL Central. I think pretty much the entire. I think as long as
Yeah,
the Dodgers were in first place, so were the Brewers. But yeah, that loss of Adamas and not doing anything to replace him, and it's not like they lost Willie Adames in free agency late. Like he signed
no,
around the same time that Blake Snell signed. He signed with the Giants, so you've had a lot of time to figure something out at shortstop. Willie Adames wasn't just a glove; he was your consistent bat too.
yeah,
Like you knew what you were getting, and I don't look at what their projected lineup is and see that maybe you're not going to get too much more from Christian Yelich at this point in his career. You know, he's gonna start to decline sort of significantly around this point in his career. I'm not saying this means a bad year for him. I'm saying, it's coming and you don't know if that's going to be this year, if this is the year you're going to have to make a decision about him or not. I unlike you though do think that Devin Williams giving up that home run did have something to do with it because I think maybe it wasn't the decisive factor, right? But I do think that they were a little more open to it. I think if he makes the pitch there and they at least win that game or whatever, maybe it's a different story. Now, I don't think at all plus 290 second favorites. I don't think that's where they should be. I don't like the idea of writing off the Brewers because they seem to always find a way, right? But I look at this division and there's another team that I think should be second favorites that I think is a lot better than them. And as you said about the Cubs, have also significantly improved, and it's the Cincinnati Reds. And if I'm being honest, I like the Cubs. I do. I agree that they should be the favorites. But this is my team in the Central, dude.
Mm,
This is my team in the Central. Look, fine.
okay.
Last year doesn't tell the story. 77 and 85, completely missed the playoffs. Jonathan India is not on the team anymore. But they added Gavin Lux because the Dodgers, if in case anyone was wondering, the Dodgers have a surplus of really good players that they're
Really?
gonna have to start offloading. So just a little a nugget of information there in case you didn't know. So they went and got Gavin Lux. They signed Austin Hayes. He was on a down year, but I think that he's one of those bats that can pick it up at any time. But I think the biggest move, besides Kyle Tucker going to the Cubs, the biggest move made in the NL Central, and one of the biggest moves I think in the entire league was the Cubs hiring or the Reds hiring Terry Francona to be their manager. Like, I get that there's a solid population of people that don't think that a locker room has to gel in baseball to win. If you don't think that, and what you need to do is go back and watch the Dodgers World Championship parade and see how important Kike freaking Hernandez is to that roster. He's not the best player there. He's not even close. You could make the argument he shouldn't even be starting or playing on that team, but they love him in that locker room. He brings them together. And there have been team after team that have hired a manager, and you think it's this great manager. He's got all this history, and then nothing becomes of it. A la Chicago White Sox, right? They had one of the best rosters in baseball just a few years ago, and they hired Tony La Russa, and he was apparently saying like racist stuff to Tim Anderson or whatnot, and it just didn't work out there. And then he ended up like just retiring for health reasons. Fine, but that's a problem. I mean, you're a Yankee fan, I'm a Yankee fan. How long have we been crying about Aaron Boone? But then you look at a team like the Reds that's young. And what you have to remember with youth in general is the one thing they need more than anything, especially when they're making more money than they've ever made before and playing in front of thousands of people every night and even more than that on TV. They need to be guided. They need guidance. They need leadership. Who better to do that job than the guy who went into Boston and said, I don't believe in curses. We're just going to go ahead and do it today with some of the biggest names in baseball, probably the best pitcher in the game at that time in Pedro Martinez, and then David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, Kevin Youkilis, all the personalities on that team. Some of them didn't mesh well, especially when they brought in Kurt Schilling, and he was able to bring them together to win, right? He also went to Cleveland and did the same thing. They were one inning away from a world championship in Cleveland under Terry Francona. It didn't happen. It was destiny was on the side of the Cubs that year. Now he's with the Reds. with a dynamic team like Ellie De La Cruz, Jamer Candelario, Spencer Steer, Will Benson, Stuart Fairchild. You're getting Matt McClain back healthy at second, and he's really good. And people kind of forgot about that because India's been doing a great job. This team with the right coach is a winning team, and I think they just hired the right coach.
No, totally. I like the Reds. I like the Reds a lot. I think my problem with them is the pitching. That's my problem.
Yeah,
However, what I will say about the Reds, they're the biggest wild card, not only in this division but in the National League, in my opinion. They're the biggest wild card. They have the potential to make the biggest noise, or it could be a failed experiment. I see the vision, though. I see the vision. I love Terry Francona, right? I'll give you, I'll tell you a little something. A couple years ago, I really wanted the Yankees to hire him. I've always been a
yeah,
huge Terry Francona guy because there's something about him. He's not like I listen. Tony La Russa, I have a lot of respect for him. Other guys throughout history, Sparky Anderson, Billy Martin, some of the great managers of all time. They're all great, but there's something about the way Francona manages where he just commands respect. And he is a bit of a player's manager, but in a way that he gets his respect and he knows how to make a clubhouse mesh well together, right? He changed the vision in Boston, right? He went to
yeah,
Cleveland and changed how things were happening there. He didn't finish below third in any of his years as Cleveland manager, and now he's going to Cincinnati. And listen, there's a chance this may not work out, but it's not going to be because of Terry. It's not going to be because of Tito. It's going to be
yeah,
because of the players maybe not figuring it out. However, this lineup does have a lot of potential, right? I love Matt McClain. I think he's an excellent player. I think that was a big player they lost last season. I think they getting him back healthy into this season, that's going to be big for them. I don't even need to mention Ellie De La Cruz. We all know him. Gavin Lux, right? I don't know how big of a move that was. That was more of like a depth, some versatility there. He's going
mm,
to help out. I mean, because I remember the Yankees were in on him, and I wasn't really too big of a fan of that. I think he's a nice player. He's definitely going to make them better, but I don't know how big it is. Hopefully, he can prove me wrong. Overall, the pitching though, that's where I'm concerned, right? I think they have some names. Hunter Green, big step forward last season, right? Got some Cy Young votes, right? He was an All Star,
problem with Hunter Green though, always is the same one is he just can't go that deep in the games.
right?
He's said it himself that like he's never learned a good throwing routine to get his arm to that point. They did add like Brady Singer from the Royals.
Well,
He had a
I
really
like
good year with Kansas City, but my biggest thing with the pitching, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring this up
no,
while we're on that topic, and it's this is one of those teams that has a whole lot of youth to also trade. So
mhm,
if they're a team that's in the running come the deadline, like I don't think there's going to be a team that has more essentially currency to go get big pitching.
yeah, no, totally. And if they're in it in any form, right? They could be a couple games out even by the deadline. They got to make that big move. I don't know who that is because,
Yeah,
that's why before the season, I hate talking about the deadline just because so many things can happen, right? Some teams, there could be some teams that are favorites heading into the season that could be sellers by the deadline and have big players to sell. I don't know who that is, but they're definitely going to be some names out there that they can trade for. What they do have, I've always been pretty high on Brady Singer. Only problem is I don't see how it's going to get much better. Kansas City's got a deep outfield. Cincinnati's more of a boombox, right? They got to see something in him to have made that trade. Andrew Abbott's a good pitcher though. He took a big step forward last year. Um, he's going to be good. I would think he's like number three there.
yeah,
Bullpen, I mean, not much really stands out to me. And Brent Suter's pretty good. They do have Nick Lodolo in the starting rotation. He's a guy who
yeah,
I really believe in to take a step forward. He wasn't good last year, but he's also a bit unhealthy recently. So maybe getting him back healthy, that could be a big arm. But listen, they had the vision is there. There's definitely a vision there. They could be very explosive next season, or this could just be a failed experiment. But um, definitely, there's a reason to go to the ballpark if you're a Cincinnati fan, and I think that's the least you can ask for. It's an exciting group they have over there for sure.
yeah. I mean, I think a couple years ago they made that little run.
Yeah.
when they had fireworks going off during Taylor Swift concerts and people didn't care about Taylor Swift. And that was the year that they put everyone on notice. And so I think last year no one kind of slept on the Reds, and that's why the season went how it went. I'm big on that. I'm big on, you show the league who you are, the league will remember, right? And that's why I kind of say these things earlier about Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele. I'll say it later on in a couple days, in a few weeks about the Kansas City Royals as well. Just to give a slight preview on that. Um, the league will remember you. The league will learn you. And the big thing for me with the Reds now is they're deep. They're so deep that there's a million combination, not a million, but there's a bunch of combinations of infield and outfield, and especially lineup that Terry Francona has at his disposal for any given matchup. Right? Think about essentially what AJ Hinch did with the Tigers pitching to
Yeah.
get to the playoffs. I feel like that's what Tito can kind of do with his hitting to make the
Mhm.
playoffs. Is
Yeah.
obviously Ellie De La Cruz being a switch hitter. There's no way he comes out of that lineup. Jamer Candelario is the same thing, but then everyone else is kind of very plug and play and see what works and see what doesn't.
Yeah, it's fair game for them, and I think Terry Francona, again, he wouldn't come out of retirement for just anyone. Right, I don't think. I mean, this is a guy who I think he liked Cleveland. Is he staying in the same state? I think he
Yeah.
enjoyed his time in Cleveland. I don't think he necessarily wanted to leave. It just you definitely want to take some time off. There was a reason why he's joining the Reds. He sees something. He sees a vision here. He sees a group of kids that he can join and improve. And I think of one that I think of that's pretty similar to this was the Rangers hiring Bruce Bochy.
With
'Cause
Bochy,
I view
yep.
that as, like, he's just, that's his retirement, like, he's just doing that just so he's not staying at home all day, he's just gonna go manage the Texas Rangers, and wouldn't you know, the next year they win the World Series. I'm not saying that's gonna happen in Cincinnati, but
Right.
it's listen, this guy sees something here. It's not just his retirement job. He's doing this because he sees a vision here, sees an environment that he can create, a winning environment that he could create. And so, and with a guy like him, I mean, he did that twice in his career with Boston and then Cleveland. It worked out perfectly both times. Definitely a lot of reason to be excited in Cincinnati. And I think that's more than you could say about a team we're going to talk about a little later because they're really disappointing me. We'll get to that. We'll get
Alright, so then let's go to the Pirates before we get to that team.
yeah.
I got excited
It's
about
not
the
the Pirates. I'll tell you right now, it's not the Pirates. So who could
it's
it be?
I think everyone knows what team it is. It's we'll get there because
Yeah.
I feel the same way, but I think there's a reason for that. Now, the Pirates, though, in the meantime, I got excited for them coming out of the All-Star break last year. I felt like they got real hot for like a couple weeks, and the second I was like, all right, they're hot. They just crash and burn. 76 and 86. I don't really know who they lost off the top of my head. I know they picked up Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier. Um, Frazier's okay. I think Pham at this point in his career, everyone knows he's that quote unquote veteran presence in the locker room. That I do think the Pirates sort of need. Um, Again, you're coming off the rookie of the year for Paul Skeens, and then O'Neal Cruz is moving from shortstop to center field, which is not easy, but I think I trust that he'll be good there, or at least better than there than at short. He definitely has some holes at short. Paul Skeens, though, all-star starter his rookie year. Feel how you wanted to feel about that. I think he deserved it. I don't really only because I couldn't think of anybody else that should have done it,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
but it's sophomore year
Yeah.
and it's sophomore slump time. And my biggest thing is the Pirates have had a few guys the last few years, like Brian Reynolds and Brian Hayes, that came in hot as rookies. They weren't rookie of the year, but they came hot young and then struggled sophomore year and then kind of just leveled out as solid, not superstar players. I don't know that Skeens won't be the same thing. Skeens is very high up on people's list this year of pitchers. I don't know. What do you got? I
Right.
don't know.
You know what it is? I have listen, this is all just, like, off the dome. This is all just, like, my personal beliefs. I'm a firm believer in the sophomore slump.
Yeah.
I just Paul Skeens is, like, just a different animal. Like, this guy, you never see him smiling. Nothing gets to this guy. That's the type of player you want on your team. I don't even think the sophomore slump even applies to Paul Skeens because the way
Mm,
he pitched last season was not like a rookie. That was like a veteran. That was like a Garrett Cole, what Garrett Cole's doing for the Yankees or any great pitcher in the game. That's what that
mhm,
was. That was Fernando Mania, what he was doing last season. He was taking the ball every fifth day and he was just riding with it. He was the type of guy, he was above his manager, right? He was the one calling the shots whenever or how long he'd be able to pitch. I can't see this guy falling off. I can't
mm.
see him being a mediocre pitcher in this game. I think he's gonna be a favorite to win Cy Young. I'm that high on Paul Skeens this year.
Wow.
He's just the type of player he has that mentality that tells me this guy's the maturity level of a 30-year-old, and he's how old? Like 20, 22, 23. And I mean,
Yeah,
he already proved that. Because what, he got drafted last year and he makes the major leagues in a year, right? Very few guys
yeah.
can do that. Paul Skeens has the mentality, the wherewithal to do that. I think he's great. The thing with the Pirates, though, they made some nice moves, right? They bring in Spencer Horwitz as a guy they got from Cleveland who came from Toronto, and
Mm,
that whole thing. Couple smaller signings. They're not going to win this year. I don't think they're going to win this year, but they give their fans a reason to come to the ballpark, right? It's already a nice ballpark to begin with. And hey,
yeah,
we got Paul
beautiful.
Skeens, we got O'Neal Cruz, two very dynamic young players, exciting. There's a reason to go watch the Pirates this season. I don't think they're going to win, but you never know. You never know what can happen. And when you have guys like that, young dynamic players like Skeens and Cruz, anything is possible. They're giving their fans a reason to be excited, and that's all you can ask for.
What I think the Pirates should have done is they should have been the team to sign Max Scherzer. I don't know what the Blue Jays want with Max. I don't, there's when you get that late in your career, especially as a pitcher, right? Like a Justin Verlander, like a Max Scherzer, it's usually they want you to accompany somebody and start teaching your ways, right? I don't understand why the Pirates didn't do that. I don't understand why you don't go get a Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer who's there waiting for a job and just fork out some money for him to just mentor your rookie of the year when he goes into his sophomore year. Fine, you may think like you said, Paul Skeens is very mature and he's very this and that, but this is still going to be his second year in the major leagues. It's only going to get harder from here. It's not going to get easier. So to me, that was a bit of a miss. And now, if Skeens doesn't have a good year, it's on the organization. It's on the front
Mhm,
office. It's not really on him because you didn't provide him the
for
tools that
sure.
you could have.
Absolutely. And I'll put it very simply, they're one of the worst run organizations in baseball. Skeens because he fell to them and because Dylan Cruz had the whole thing where he didn't want to go to Pittsburgh. That's the only reason they took Paul Skeens. And Paul Skeens again comes into this situation, wins a Cy Young, ERA below 2, gets Cy Young votes in his first year. Again, he's just different. He's just very different from most players, right? Like there are plenty of young players in this league that I do apply the sophomore slump to, and I'm not saying Paul Skeens can't do that, but they are putting a lot of pressure on him. And if anyone can answer that pressure, I think Paul Skeens is one of the few young players that can do that. But again, this organization, the way they've been run, it's very poor. I don't see it getting better anytime soon. they're lucky that they have Paul Skeens. Is all I'm saying. I think that they should be grateful every single day that they have Paul Skeens on their roster because now that's a reason for their fans to come to the ballpark every fifth day. Because without Paul Skeens, this team is screwed. And when he
Yeah.
eventually, right, when they eventually screw this up, and he leaves and he goes to a bigger team and he wins a couple of World Series, and they're the same place where they are right now. It's not on Paul Skeens. It's on the organization, as you mentioned. They got to be run better. They got to be the team that makes these moves. It's the way it's the way you have to be as a baseball team. It's what the Reds are doing. It's what the Cubs have done. You got to be aggressive, and they haven't been aggressive. It's very disappointing.
Yeah, I think the saddest part is that, as you mentioned, I got my map back here of all the ballparks that I've been to, and easily the most beautiful one is PNC Park out there in
Mhm.
Pittsburgh. I was supposed to be out there for opening weekend, but plans have changed, and I'll actually be in Florida. But yeah, I feel bad. It's funny too because when I was there, I spoke to fans and I asked them like, "Hey, is there a chance that the Pirates go to the playoffs?" And they're like, "No, yeah, absolutely not." I was like, "All right, that's at least you're being realistic," but that hurts. That hurts the soul. So let's hurt the soul a little more and talk
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
Cardinals. Chris's favorite team in the National League Central, right?
Listen, um, look, because I've always been a big NL Central guy. I've always enjoyed talking about this division. Always in my time as a baseball fan, because I genuinely like each team in this division. I would rock gear of every team. Like I have a Cubs hat, I have a Cardinals hat. I like the St. Louis Cardinals. I like what they're about. I like some of the great players they've had. But what they're doing this season is they're basically just telling their fans, we're not winning. We're not competing. We're not gonna be in it. And the thing that's so frustrating is they're in limbo compared to the Pirates. The Pirates, you're not expecting to be good, but there's a vision with the Pirates, right? They have a bit of a core there, and it's frustrating that they're not building upon that. But the Cardinals, on the other hand, they have no vision. Their big offseason move was we're trying to get rid of Nolan Arenado, and they didn't even do that.
Mm,
They couldn't even do that. And there's really no young player in this organization. I mean, I guess JJ Weatherholton, who they drafted last year, is exciting, but he's not going to be up for a couple of years. They didn't make any signings. They didn't. Yeah, they lost a couple players. Uh, they have their rotation. They have Sonny Gray, who I liked. I rooted for him with the Yankees. He's been great since leaving, but he's kind of getting older, and he's probably going to get more injury prone. Eric Fetty wasn't great for them. Then he was okay. I mean, they got him from the White Sox. He's all right, I guess. They do have Ryan Helsley, who is a good closer, but again, what's that bridge going to be to the closer, right? Who else is taking the ball every the other three
right.
days of the five, right? And who's in this lineup, right? It's a decent. They got some names, right? Newt Barr, Burleson. They got some names, but again, it's just a weird message to send to your fans in an off season, we're trying to trade this player. That's the only thing you've heard about with the Cardinals is we're trying to trade Nolan. They couldn't even do that. And the only reason people are going to the games this year is because they have one of the best followings in sports. They have one of the best fan bases in Major League Baseball. They love the Cardinals over there. They're going to show up, but they're going to show up to a team that's probably going to be like no more than 500. Eddie, I can't see this team winning. I'm not a fan of what they're doing, bro. I'm not.
Under 500 is crazy.
I'm Eddie. This division, it's all about the message you're sending to the fans, I think. They're sending a terrible message to their fans.
Fair.
We're trying to trade Nolan, and we couldn't even do that. We have a guy who we don't want here, who's declining, and we're
Yeah.
struggling to trade him. That's all they did. They did nothing else. Real quick, the only thing I could think of that Cardinals fans should hold their hat on is that they hired Heim Bloom. That's the only thing. That's the only thing but that's a future move. This guy's gonna build the farm system up. That's the only thing I can think of.
So I've been a big believer in they need to fire Ali Marmol for a couple years now. I
I agree.
think the problem kind of starts there in St. Louis
Mhm.
because I agree with the message, right? I don't think it was an intentional message that they sent to the Cardinals fans, the organization. I think they did want to trade Arenado, I'm sure that Nolan at this point or at that point as well probably was like, all right, trade me. And then the problem was the 16 trade clause and
Yeah.
pick 16s that kind of don't need an aging corner infielder, right? Like, why were the Angels on that list? They already have Anthony Rendon, who they're wasting money on. They don't want to also pay Nolan Arenado to not play as well. I mean, it didn't make sense, right? I think as well, he probably this is me speculating and gossiping now, right? I think Nolan Arenado went to his agent and said, "Hey, find me the teams that I definitely won't like play on, and that definitely won't try to trade for me, and put them on the list because I'm sure, I'm 100% sure." Had he put the New York Yankees on there, who love an aging corner infielder, he would have been traded. But he did, right? And I think it's because he knew, right? Boston was on that list. They weren't going to trade for an aging corner infielder. They already had Devers, and they had their eye on Bregman. So they weren't going to make that trade. And the Dodgers, I think, were on that list too. They weren't going to make that trade. Nolan, are we for real? So I think he kind of knew what he was doing and picked those teams on purpose. Now, my thing is, the reason they want to trade Nolan Arenado is because they want to move Brendan Donovan over to third. I want to say he came up, it's either Donovan or Gorman came up as a third baseman, and they want to put him back there because they need to open up space for both of those guys to hit in that lineup. Because when they are hitting, this lineup is insane, dude. Like, I know to you they're just names that can be good, but anytime you have a bunch of names that can be good, it means that that team in theory is good. They just gotta put it together. I mean, Bar played on Team Japan. That's how good he was. Jordan Walker's power is out of this world when he connects with the ball. And then you have Burleson, and then you have Gorman, and then you have Brendan Donovan. They're trying to build that around also building Mason Wynn at short. Fine, whatever. I don't know if that's a long term plan or not. He's young. They're gonna leave him there for a few years. Fine. And then you look at the pitching, right? And you're backing up Sonny Gray with Eric Fetty, who didn't have the worst year. He was just on the worst team in baseball for most of it, so that's kind of not his fault. And Ryan Helsley coming off of his reliever of the year season. I get it. I get everything you're saying. I do, and I agree with most of it. But I don't agree that the Brewers have a better chance at this division than the Cardinals do. Because again, we hate to talk about the deadline when the regular season hasn't even started, but Nolan Arenado is not going to be a Cardinal past this trade deadline. Like, I get that spring training has started, but he can be traded today. He can be traded tomorrow. Like, it can happen at any time. And I don't think that it's not going to happen. I absolutely am a firm believer Nolan Arenado would not finish out this season as a St. Louis Cardinal. They need to move him. The team needs to move him. And he now knows he also needs to move. So it'll happen. What you're going to get back from him, I have no idea, but I don't look at this as a roster that needs so much to win. Like I look at the Brewers, like I look at the Pirates. I don't see that with these Cardinals. And let's not be surprised when that happens. Look, 2 years ago, the Cardinals were the favorites to win the division. Everybody thought they were going to be this great team. They ended up in last place. Last year, people were like, all right, they're going to be really good this year. They ended the season in second place. Fine, it's second place in the NL Central. It's not like They were in second place in the entire National League or something like that. They were barely over 500. But I do think it's a bit of an addition by subtraction kind of thing. Getting rid of Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah.
He was aging.
Yeah.
He's only gonna
You're
get
right.
worse. That's why the Yankees only signed him for 1 year, not like the 2 year with the option that we've seen. They literally said, no, you got one. You get one, and basically you get to the deadline to show that we still need you, or we're kicking you out of here. Right. And then they were trying to get rid of Arenado. They were trying to do the right thing. They had these aging guys and they were trying to get out of these contracts. I think they tried to do the right thing. It didn't work out all the way, but there's still time for this to work out for this season for this Cardinals team.
No, for sure. And listen, it could be, this could be a take that doesn't age very well for me. But I
PTSD. It's PTSD.
listen, it's just they this is the same team as last year, and
Yeah.
they were okay. They were okay. They were not completely. They weren't awful. They were a couple games over 500, right? They were all right, but they're not doing anything this offseason. Their entire offseason, they're telling their fans, "We're trying to get rid of this guy. That's it." The Brewers, listen, the Brewers for years, their fans have known we're never in on the free agent. We may make a trade for a young player. They're always involved in those 3-team deals. That's how they got like Luis Urias a couple years back. Then they got Wilson Contreras as well, or William Contreras rather. Right, they're going to be involved in some trades, minor little signings, but overall, it's going to be internally. That's how they operate. The Cardinals, the Cardinal way, right? They have those guys, the Yadier Molina, Adam Wainwright, those longtime Cardinals, and then they add to that core, and they'll make a big trade for like an Arenado or a Goldschmidt, and they'll just make the fan base excited, right? They're always going to be in it. They're always going to be competitive, and they're going to do it the right way. And they didn't really do that this offseason. Is the only thing that concerns me. And again, maybe it's again like I do agree with you said though. That it's addition by subtraction, right? They're trying to out with the old, in with the new. And
Mhm.
I like some of the young guys they have in the lineup. The rotation, though, I mean, Tink Hence is a guy that they're very high on. He pitched against the Yankees in spring training a couple days ago. It just didn't go very well at all, but he's got great stuff. They believe in him.
All
It's
right,
just
but question.
yeah.
What NL Central team has a good rotation right now?
No, no, listen. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it feels in general with this, even with the lineup, it feels like a lot of it is like ushering guys in. The Reds are
Mm,
more of like I think if Hunter Green doesn't figure it out now, he's not figuring it out ever, right?
right.
And Andrew Abbott is a consistent lefty arm, and Brady Singer, they're trying to figure something out there. The,
Mhm.
the Brewers, I think, have a really good rotation. I think they have a great 1-2-3 punch.
Really?
Anderson, sorry, Myers, Peralta, and if Woodruff can come back, that's a great 1-2-3. I think. I don't
Okay.
know. Enough to get to the postseason, I think.
I'll
Uh,
give you the 1 and 2.
who's the third that you don't like?
I'm not big on Myers. I don't think
Really?
he has the same season. I think
I
Peralta's
don't
proven consistency, and so has Brandon Woodruff, but I think Myers has to prove that consistency for me to look at that team and say, all right, there's a solid 3-man rotation there. Fine. But then, all right, if I'm comparing lineups, I think that the Cardinals' potential lineups for this season are way better than the Brewers' potential lineups this season.
It's true, but again, I'll compare it to last season. The Brewers finished higher, same lineups. All right, and again, this is the way
Not
the
saying
Brewers.
lineups. There's no Willie.
Yeah, but
There's no
again,
Willie Adames.
I still think right again. There's going to be no Nolan, and there's no Paul, who had a great second half last season for St. Louis. So I like what they're doing, the Cardinals, right? They out with old, in with the new. They're trying to usher in a new core. That's why they hired Heim Bloom, who you talk to any like casual Red Sox fan, they have a mini heart attack when they hear his name because they associate with him with the guy who traded Mookie Betts to the Dodgers. But you look at what's
Yeah.
happening over there right now. They have the great farm system, right? Roman Anthony. They got Garrett Crochet for some great prospects who mean nothing to them because of how good their farm system is now. That's all Heim Bloom. That's all Heim. That's not Craig Breslow. That's all
Mm.
Heim Bloom. It's like he comes into St. Louis, you can almost expect them to have a top 3 farm system in a couple of years. So that's something to look forward to. I just don't know how much they're looking at this year. I don't think they're looking at this year as a winning year. And I think that's the direction the other 3 teams that we talked about earlier, are looking at. I think Brewers fans are more excited about their team heading into this year than Cardinals fans are, because that's just the message the Brewers have always gotten is we're building internally.
Okay, so you don't think that there's a chance, or you don't lean toward, I should say, because think is a very objective term in all of this. This is we're still in spring training.
Right.
I lean toward this team, just like you said, they don't think this will be a winning year, and then they start winning.
Could happen.
I lean toward that outcome a lot more than I lean toward the outcome of this just being a brush year for the Cardinals, that they're just like, all right, we're just going to try to get from 1 to 162, healthier, whatever, or whatever happens, happens. I don't see that happening here. And I think that if that does happen, as I said earlier, as I kind of started my take on the Cardinals with, the one that has to go is Oliver freaking Marmol. Because
Yeah.
the other thing that bothers me about the Cardinals is Yadier Molina is now a coach. Albert Pujols is now a coach. They're both coaching in the Dominican Republic for opposing teams. Molina also coached Team Puerto Rico. Like, these guys can coach. So maybe the eyes are already out there for replacements for Ali Marmol's job. Maybe they're just kind of waiting to see how those two guys develop as coaches. But the fact that neither one of those guys has found their way into your dugout in the last year, even in a mentorship role, bothers me because does that mean that you're focused on Goldschmidt and Arenado, who we're seeing are sort of focused on themselves? So then no one's trying to bring this team together. And if you look at the lineup the way we've looked at it and said, all right, there's a way too much potential here for them to be as bad as they've been, somebody's got to look at that from bird's eye view and say, all right, who's going to wrangle this up if the guy whose job it is to do it isn't doing it? The two veterans in the club, the three veterans, because we're forgetting about Wilson Contreras in this whole argument. The three veterans that are there supposed to be doing it aren't doing it. So we kind of need to make a move. I feel like maybe that's what's going on, is no one's looking at it with that lens.
Yeah, no, listen, I see what you're saying, but like it feels like at all levels of this organization, it's like a transition year. Like John Maziliak, who's the longtime GM there, he's said this is my last year, and then Heim's taking over, right? It just feels like it's all of it's a transition, while the Reds are trying to make that step forward. The Cubs are taking that step forward, right? The Brewers are they're an anomaly just because they always find a way to get it done, as you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. But I just think, right, this team wasn't able to make the playoffs last year with the lineup they have now, and there just really isn't that player that like excites me, right? It feels like everything is just like it's just like mid. I don't know the other word. I don't know another word to use. Mid's the only word that comes to mind. Again, I'm a huge Sonny Gray fan, but he's only getting older. He's only getting more injury prone. I think he could be good, but how good is he compared to the other pitchers in this division?
Mm.
I mean, I don't think he's I don't I think there are way better pitchers than him at this point. Eric Fetty's good, but he's not. How much is he a difference maker? Is he a table setter? A difference, a real
He's
impact.
a, he's a give me the ball every 5 days guy.
Yeah,
I
and he's the
agree.
number two guy. I think he's going to be
Yeah.
number two. And there really isn't that like that impact player, that core. They don't have that core. Is what I'm really
Mm.
concerned about. They don't have that core player yet, and they've tried to find it. I don't think they have found it yet with like Nolan Gorman. They thought he was going to be that player. I don't think Jordan Walker is that guy. Mason Wynn is a great defensive shortstop, but I don't know. I just don't know how much of an impact player he is. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that concerns me is they don't have those impact players. They had that with Arenado and Goldschmidt. And so as long as they had those 2 together, the 3 years they did, right, it was 2021, 2022, 2023, and then this last year as well, but no one really saw them as real favorites last year. They as long as they had that core though, you can add to that core. Those are the 2 guys in St. Louis. They're gonna be the favorites to win the NL Central. They don't have that anymore. That's what concerns me, is it feels like those teams are ahead of them in that transition, and they're getting there. And with hiring Heim Bloom, it wasn't the prettiest seasons in Boston, right?
Yeah,
Most Red Sox fans hate Heim Bloom, but he set them up well now.
yeah.
That's really what it is. I could see them having like a Red Sox in the past couple years, that kind of like couple years, if I'm being honest with you.
Down.
I could
Wow.
see that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna ask you something here,
Yeah.
as before we get to our final thoughts on the NL Central, as I didn't edit that part that says the West. Um, Vladdy, I think, becomes available at the trade deadline. I think Toronto's just going to have to try to get something for him while they can, and I think so does Bo Bichette. But Vladdy, more importantly, do you think he ends up in an NL Central uniform, and if so, which team? Because I
Mm,
don't think it would be the Cubs if he does. Um,
right.
maybe Milwaukee if they're gonna keep Reese Hoskins at DH, and then the other three. I mean, it's gonna depend on who's competitive. But what do you think?
I don't think so. I
No,
don't know. I mean, I don't know why I'm blanking on who's playing first for the Cubs this season. That could
Bush,
maybe, but
Bush or Hap can play there too.
but basically you're already setting yourself up for one of Tucker and Guerrero to leave. You can keep one, and then the other's probably going to leave. So I don't know if they really want to do that.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, it'd be a rental.
yeah, but again, you're giving up a load. It's gonna take a big package. It's gonna take a big package to get him. They could. I could see that. I could see the Cubs. I think really they're the only one. 'Cause I don't see the Reds. I think they have Steer. I think they believe in Steer at first.
Mm,
I think the Brewers. I mean, the last one I could think of that they did was Sabathia, and that's different. That's a completely different story. That
yeah.
was back in 2008. So I don't know if I could see Milwaukee. That doesn't feel like their kind of move. Definitely not St. Louis, unless the Cardinals are in it. Maybe
Yeah.
that could
Yeah,
be
that's the one team that between them and maybe Milwaukee that if they're gonna if Vladdy ends up in an NL Central jersey, I'd say St. Louis if they're in it, or Milwaukee if they're in it, and that's a big if. Look, my final thoughts on the NL Central is this: you're wrong. You're wrong. All right.
okay. We'll see. We'll see.
This is gonna be one of the most exciting divisions to watch in baseball, and
I
that's
hope.
if it's not the most exciting division to watch in baseball, because I think both centrals are wide open, but but
Yes.
technical look, that's your light telling you to shut up. That your light just hit you and said, "Yeah, you're wrong, buddy." Unlike the AL Central that has a team that's completely given up for the next few years in the White Sox, the NL Central doesn't have that team. They have
Mhm.
every team can I think the least competitive team in this division is the Pirates, and even they've got a lot of potential if they just get hot at the right time, right?
Totally.
We said that O'Neal Cruz is in center field. They've opened up shortstop now. Brian Hayes is at third. Brian Reynolds is one of the best switch hitters in the game. And then you've got Skeens and anybody that plays off him. I mean, if the Tigers can make the playoffs with one good pitcher, so can pretty much every single team in the National League Central. They've just got to get hot, find a strategy, especially late in the season, and do it. So if you remember how, yeah, I'm not even gonna say that because that's not gonna make sense for my point. But I think that the NL Central will get decided game 162.
Okay.
That's my prediction for this division.
Listen, I really hope for the game of baseball, come as a big baseball fan, that you're right. Because again, I like this division. I like these teams. I like what they're doing. I, I don't know. I feel like more could have been done. I feel like more could have been done. This division has again just like Ellie De La Cruz and Paul Skeens. Again, that's already 2/3 of the MLB The Show covers this year. right, for
Yeah,
the video game, right?
right.
This division has names. Kyle Tucker in Chicago. The Cardinals don't have that name. That's the only problem that I have with them. And the Brewers have William Contreras. So there are names. There are great players in this division. So really, I hope it's exciting because these teams haven't been. This is the one division in baseball really where it's just that one team that makes it is always that 3 seed. They're always it's you win the division, you get in, and that's the only way you're getting in. So hopefully they can steer off that. Hopefully this can get back to being more of a central based game because it's really just been East and West all throughout, right? What was the last Central team to make the World Series, right? I think the two.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be the
It was
two
the Cubs.
Cleveland back in
Yeah.
2016, which is insane. So hopefully, we can get more Central teams involved, and I think they're trending. The four of them are trending in the right direction. Listen, I hope you're right. I totally do, but I just don't know how much I see it. I really see this as like a three-team race, if that. If I'm being honest,
All right. Who takes it?
Cubs.
Cubs. All right. I like the Reds. I believe in Tito, and I'm going with Cincinnati. So that was our show. I had a lot of fun this time
So did
because
I.
I really do think there's going to be a fun division. Next week we're talking NL East. We're wrapping up the National League. That's gonna that's gonna be a freaking episode if we ever had one. Chris,
That's right.
always a pleasure, my man. I will see you
Okay.
again. Same bat time, same bat place.
Appreciate it, man. See you then.